Hey guys, welcome back to another video here on Sanguinius 40K. And as you can tell, we have our inaugural guest on the channel. First time and won't be the last. So I'd like everyone to, give a, warm welcome from home watching this to Mr. John, and better known as, Blood Angels commander in the community. So welcome on board, John.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Sam. Yes, we are doing a two-part series where if you missed part one, I guess you'll catch it over on my channel. And we're just talking all about Blood Angels and the changes that are happening with Arks of Omen.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. It's been a lot of changes, a lot of interesting, point shifts, a lot of different, I guess, different mechanics to the game. I guess have kind of stayed the same, but we're kind of playing things differently now because the loss of Armor of Contempt, the data slate keeps bringing new things in and out. So I mean, who knows what they're going to bring in the next one? I believe though there should be one more before 10th edition to kind of help shore up some of the I guess touchy points. One of those being in the last video you guys can check out, obviously on John's channel. We touched on how busted Astra Militarum were for a hot minute, but we can kind of hope that GW's listening to the statistics and kind of changing things from there. But as John said, we're going to kind of pick up here with where we left off and just kind of jump right into these questions for us to kind of chat about and just kind of help Blood Angel players alike, just to kind of have a better maybe idea on maybe what direction they need to go. I feel like a lot of Blood Angel players have reached out to myself, and I know they've definitely reached out to John just to kind of have some guidance, because there's always a lot of there's always that weird, I guess, state that a lot of us get into in that limbo of not really knowing where to go or what direction to take our armies, because at the end of the day we don't want to go out and spend another $1,000 on 3 Gladiator Reapers and 3 this and that, and all of a sudden now we have a black army. But you know what I mean? It's just like, but sometimes that if that's fun for somebody, I mean that might be what you need to do, obviously, in order to find your fun. But if you're in the trenches, just kind of play testing and you don't know where to go, hopefully John and I can help you out. So we'll jump into question number 4. And how important is mobility in a Blood Angels list, and what units can be used to maximize it? So John, what do you think?
Well, I think you touched on it. Like, Wrath of Baal is such a good, powerful relic, and I guess the changes now where we can finally not have to sacrifice our elite slots to take those elite characters. You must have been using that, right? That's pretty nice, right?
Yeah. So now I finally shifted to the Wrath of Baal for the first time, just because now I can actually fit that character in without taking away from the slots. So it's been really big, and people have always asked me, how do you not have the slots if you're taking 1 Death Company and 3 Sanguinary Guard? Like, obviously you have slots for that, and it's just like, well, no, the scouts take up a slot, so I also don't leave home without scouts. So I think now that actually adding those 3 elite slots that are made for characters, I think is really helpful. I think that's an argument to actually, depending again on the list, and maybe John, you might see this in a list for yourself in the future, is maybe bringing that Selfless Valor Judiciary or Judiciary, however you say that.
Yeah.
And actually, it's a really interesting pick all of a sudden at 75 points. I mean, I like that points drop with a Warlord trait like that on him. I think that adds a ton of flexibility. He can ride in an Impulsor. He can go with the Blade Guard. All of a sudden, now there's real synergies to this list, and it does shore up an interesting area for us where we lack that durability. We kind of gain it there. We lack some of that control on the board. Now we're regaining it, all without affecting our actual slots to do so. So I mean, it's actually a really interesting thought.
Yeah, well, I mean, we touched on in the first part how some terrain obviously varies board to board, and where I am, maybe I feel like I need some durable stuff. In the meta that I play in, with the meta terrain that's on the table, it's very difficult to get across the board with and in Arks of Omen, in Nephilim, I did run like 3 squads of Death Company, 3 squads of Sanguinary Guard. I actually think I ran 5. I think it was 3 Death Company, 2 Sanguinary Guard, and then the Ancient, because you've got 5 jump units, you want the extra 2 inches of move. And I love the Ancient, but
Right.
I think we've gone different ways. You've obviously started including the Ancient, and I guess players will have to decide, like, if they're playing in America or they're playing in the WTC and they feel like, hey, I have enough terrain on the board to do that, they can obviously copy what you've done. But if you're playing maybe in the UK, or you're playing on, maybe you're a less experienced player, or maybe there's just less terrain on the board in the meta that you're in, then maybe that's where that Blade Guard with the free Shield Dome Impulsor
Yeah.
And I was running a Primaris Apothecary inside it. I mean, like, mainly to
Yeah.
revive Bladeguard, in that nobody runs Primaris Apothecaries, but I figured 6 up Feel No Pain, revive the Bladeguard, and I was actually running him with Rites of War, because I figured, like,
Right.
5 Obsec Bladeguard with revives and stuff is pretty useful. And I saw definite value out of that in a meta where I felt like I need to have invulnerable saves, or I need to have units that I can play transhuman on, because in some matchups it's just my guys are going to be in the open.
Yeah, and that's all super valid, and I think you hit the nail on the head. And it's really just a matter of just adapting your list to the terrain. I feel like a lot of times people will build a Blood Angel list. They'll play against their friends, and there's nothing wrong with that. Please, I encourage that. Continue to play against your friends, but remember, how you play against your friends in your basement is going to be different than that tournament that you might show up to. Or if you want to go have a good representation, and maybe possibly place for whatever your personal goals are, you have to really look at the player pack. And I feel like a lot of people show up on day one of the event and are a little surprised, like, oh God, I can't play into Tau on this table, or God forbid I get paired into Iron Hands now. It's like, well, if you looked at the pack, then maybe you would have just chosen those different units. So like for me at the Frontline Gaming event I went to, that was my first time going to an FLG event, which was the LVO, as I already touched upon. And you know, at first I thought I made a bad decision running the Fury of the Lost list. Now I know there was like 5 Blood Angel players in the top 25. So I mean, we all had very similar lists because it was just the 3x3 Death Company, or so 3x5 and 3x5 or 3x7 Sanguinary Guard, pretty much, I think it was. So it's like turned out it was pretty good, and I guess obviously generalship is a big factor there. But on some of the tables, it was just like insanity. Where I think it was round 2. The table I played on had 1 large ruin that you placed, a small ruin, I'm talking like 5 inches, and then a single crate, like a 4x2 crate, and that's all you get on your whole side of the table. And that
And
was
and you won.
I won that game. I think it was like 100-50, but that's because I played against a 5 monster demon list that
Okay.
had no shooting on it. And the hilarious part of it was that these Keeper of Secrets with their whips were killing everything that they could shoot at, though. And I was like, oh my goodness, like this is insanity. So like you needed luck of the draw in that event, honestly. And it's insane that I know we touched upon it already, but I just kind of to conclude the point here, it's just like you really need to evaluate what terrain you're playing into. And I know John touched on it, where it's like if you're playing on WTC, now all of a sudden, like, you actually have set tables in WTC, so you can actually see now. It's like, well, if I want to actually get from that ruin to that ruin, what's my movement here? Like, do I need a 14-inch moving model to get there? The answer might be yes. Or it's like, or do I just need to roll a 2-up on my blade guard because it's only actually like an 8-inch gap, and I actually comfortably can move from ruin to ruin now. It's like you really have to evaluate those options when building a list, and definitely don't overlook taking a gander at the player pack. And no, you're definitely not trying too hard if you're reading a pack to be prepared for a tournament. You're just having a good time and want to get the most out of your weekends. So
I was going to say, you spend a lot of money, traveling to tournaments, going to hotels, all this sort of stuff. It's worth doing the pack. I actually now will print the pack off myself, and I'll write down before some of the secondary choices, so that I hate being at a table and be like, you're setting up, you've just moved table, you only get 5 minutes before the game starts, and you just feel like you don't have enough time to be like, right, what secondary should I really be doing here? And sometimes I'll even write down we call them the primary plus. I don't know what you call them, but like the second part of the primary now, where it's like, oh, this map is the map I can set up the bombs. Well, I know I just need to get one unit 1 inch over there, and then he can start setting up bombs. And like, I'll write that shit down and take that with me. So when I'm at the event and I think, shit, I only get 2 minutes before this game starts, I can just be like, right, this is what I thought last night when I was calm and collected. So that's what I'll pick. And I think if you don't print out like you were saying, don't worry about trying too hard. I think if you don't, then you're spending your money to go to the tournament and just you're literally just rolling a d6 and going like, maybe I'll do well.
Exactly. No, it's exactly true.
Yeah.
So question 5 here. So how do you build a balanced Blood Angel list that can deal with a variety of opponents and missions? Okay. So do you want to tackle this one first? I want to hear what you have to think first.
I think my philosophy before was to try and take too many tools. Like, you need a tool to deal with everything, and we've touched on that a
Yeah.
little bit in part one. How we said like the whirlwind is good in some matchups, but in other matchups it does nothing for you. So I think possibly I think I sort of mind shifted towards like quarter three last year when I sort of started doing better in every event I was going to. I was doing this like writing on the player pack, and then that was when I started going like, right, I'm just going to build my army around 3 secondaries, or I'm going to have like
Right.
3 secondaries I always know I'm going to score really well on, and then as long as you're, as long as you've got some obsec and you take maybe Rights of War, which we both talked about, how we both run a
Right.
captain with Rights of War, and we feel that's really strong.
Right.
The primary game, you've got to hold primaries, right? Everybody knows you've got to do that. So I think my thought now is maybe not trying to think about like, oh shit, I need a whirlwind because Harlequins will make me fight last, or I need this because this might happen, or I need invans. I think it's better to be like, how am I scoring? Because points win games, right?
Right.
I think that's how I look at it now. What about yourself?
No, that's a really good view, and I am similar. But funny enough, I am like the toolbox guy. Like that's like what I take pride in, where it's like I want to be able to open up my Swiss Army knife and have a tool for everything. But obviously, and you know this obviously as well, but based on exactly what you just said, you're not going to be able to fit every tool you want into a game of 40K, unfortunately. So I feel like what we have to kind of remember is we are Blood Angel players, right? When we're bringing this to an event, so it's like, what does our army do on the tin? We hit really, really hard. So that's kind of our anti, everything in a nutshell, in terms of, if we punch it, we know we're going to do well with it. Unless you're charging 40 Deathwing Terminators. But anyway, that's a whole different story. So pretty much it's like, now that we're kind of evaluating, we realize what our identity is as a faction, then it's like, okay, step two, which is exactly where you went with this, is secondaries. How do I play my game without being disrupted in theory, right? So it's like, usually it's like the 3 that you build in, maybe a 4th as like a token one that you have a bit of flexibility with, so that in case someone kind of disrupts your original plan, you can kind of have a fallback. And then of course, if they bleed a secondary, like a no prisoners, like a like bring it down, one of those, or aboard the witch even, it's like, why not, right? We just lean into that and take advantage. But then in terms of the rest of the tools that come with it, I'm someone who's always actually been a very balanced player. I think Fury of the Lost actually pulled me away from what I'm used to and what I do best with, which is actually simply having a lot more tools. And I realized my WTC list to my LVO list was just like, like on paper it doesn't seem very different, but it's like when you remove Lamarty's, when you remove the 2 Death Company squads and what I was bringing in for the WTC, it adds so much more variety and plays the game so much more fluently for my playstyle, because it has so many more tools, that sometimes going fully one-dimensional has its limits, and it always will, right? Because now you're skewing. And again, there's nothing wrong with it, especially if you truly love the models, for example, or if you love the playstyle. That's like always what I tell everyone. If you want to run 30 Death Company because that's what your heart tells you to do, then always be happy with what you're playing on the table, no matter what. But if you're looking to get that competitive edge and try and have a good run at an event, you really do have to not skew too much, because skews have always showed us they're like always like an X and 1 factor. They always have an X and 1 result for the most part, unless
Yeah.
like it's the first week or two, for example, and just no one figured it out yet. But then they obviously do, and then now you're like a X and 2 factor, or list, I should say. So I mean, now you're a gatekeeper, right? So it's like, and I feel like this kind of goes back to what John was saying in part one, with you're going into another army. They can fight on death. They can fight first. They can make you fight last. What's like, that is a combat army now. So now all of a sudden, you bringing shooting into your build and having some sort of anti-elite infantry, anti any sort of infantry at range, changes that matchup drastically, versus you going all in combat, right? Now I know Jack, for example, Jack Harpster, he did really well at the U.S. Open with Blood Angels and at LVO as well, but the metas like totally permitted that, and the games that he was basically playing into. So I mean, now of course there's a bit of luck that comes with that. He didn't pick to play against the armies he did. That's just very luck of the draw. Now, had he had played Cow on the mission that I did, going first and whatnot, who knows? Maybe Jack wins that game. Maybe he doesn't. Who knows, right? But it's like, you're kind of just bringing the right tools so that you can play into any game, and that's kind of why I didn't like the fact that that loss happened. Not because of the player, not because of the matchup, because I just didn't have the tools now to change the outcome of, even with everything against me. So that kind of felt like that helplessness. So I feel like more tools definitely is the way to go, but obviously within certain limits.
Cool. Yeah. So I guess what we're saying is pick your favorite tools because like, you can't include everything.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, it's like for example, like the whirlwind came in because I quickly looked at who's probably coming to the event, and I knew there's going to be a lot of Custodes. And then lo and behold, when the stats came out, when all the lists were revealed, it was like 15 Custodes players, and I was like, okay, I'm like the whirlwind was like the perfect pick here. But that's it. There wasn't any Custodes. Like now the whirlwind does nothing, and I wish that was 125 points elsewhere. So it's like really just again take a look at the meta. Be like, okay, cool. There's going to be like 30 Tau players. Well, it looks like I'm going to need a bunch of suppressors to shut down Overwatch all game or whatever. So you know what I mean? It's just really take a look at what you're about to go into.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, how important is board control in a Blood Angels list? What units can we use to achieve it?
Pretty so board control. Question. Oh man, but board control right now is a totally different, like description from what it used to mean for us. Because board control before with Armor of Contempt meant if you dig in with like 21 Sanguinary Guard into the midboard, like nobody's shifting you. But now 21 Sanguinary Guard in the midboard, it's like you could just get tabled. And I know it's like, well, is Armor of Contempt that big of a deal? And it sadly really is. Especially with the AP creep in the game, I felt like it just kind of came back. And people now that, because I feel like before, people kind of just accepted Armor of Contempt and didn't creep their AP. They were just like, well, my AP 1 and 2 is going to get through them eventually. But like now there's no Armor of Contempt. People are like, oh, wow, there's no Armor of Contempt. So if I bring back my AP 3, AP 4, I just kill Marines outright. Okay, perfect. Like let's just do that then. So it's like, it's been like a double whammy actually. And I feel like a lot of the pointy ears are going to come out of the woodworks now because their AP 3 and AP 4 really does mean something now. Even when we're in cover, AP 1 army wide, obviously, even on things like witches, for example, in a Drukhari army used to do nothing to Sanguinary Guard. Now all of a sudden, when they roll 6s to wound in their AP 2, now all of a sudden we're just losing Sanguinary Guard left, right, and center. So it's like board control really has changed a lot, and I feel like we still need to project threat from certain areas of the board, but actually having true board control in an actual physical presence, I think doesn't really exist anymore, because we need to be able to kind of project threat ranges without being hit back in those certain ranges, if that makes sense. Now,
yeah, no,
you know what I mean?
I think you're 100% right there. It's like you're using the infiltrators to shore up. If it's a 5 objective map, you're using the infiltrators to shore up and screen the 2 in your side. Right. And then you need sort of like bases of cover where, as you say, you might not actually want any models right in the middle. But you have a model 6 inches away that can either heroically intervene or charge in the second the opponent goes into cover. I've noticed a few of my games actually in Arks of Omen have become these standoff games where, like, because I play a bit of Marines against Marines, and like neither player, both of us might have picked Oath, but no one wants to go to the middle because they know that the first person who puts in the middle is instantly going to get traded away. And I've had these weird games, and that's where I've seen some strength in the Blade Guard, where I could maybe just edge one Blade Guard out, daisy chained back because it's this 5-man squad, so we've got one Blade Guard touching the objective, but they're still within range of the priest. And I'm like, right, well now the middle is mine. And I actually did that in the tournament that I won. I put my I advanced a squad of infiltrators onto the middle. It was against Tau on Abandoned Sanctuaries.
Wow.
Sticky the middle, and then fucking so like he shot loads. I transhumaned them, I smoke screened them, I had them daisy chained back to the priest, and I was like, all I need is one infiltrator to survive, and then I will have stickied the middle in my command phase. And this will actually score me a lot of points because he's not going to come to the middle because my Sangre Guard will jump on him and eat him alive, you know?
Right.
So sticking the middle with the infiltrators was like, that was my goal. So in that game, I actually brought my Whirlwind out of cover and put it on another objective just as a big, like, hey, my Whirlwind's out. You're a Tau player. You should shoot this. So I can stick you the damn middle objective.
Great play. Great play.
He did. He took, I mean, like, you know, the Whirlwind's going to turn off his Overwatch, so why would he not try and kill it? But
Not
yes,
to categorize all the fish people players, but if they see a big shiny thing in the back, they'll shoot it. So there you go. Quick Blood Angel tip there for everybody.
so it is different now. It is different for sure. Board control.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a bad thing. I just think we need to be aware that like trades are gonna really win us games now.
Yeah, and that's kind of why, like in my, and I hate to keep going back to my list, and but that's kind of what my experience kind of leads me to is like I had the Death Company, I had the triple Sanguinary Guard, and I had the double Assault Marines. So it's like in the games where I needed to retrieve battlefield data, one would start in reserve just to get it done, and if they die, it's 108 points, they die. Period. At least I get my secondary in a tougher spot, or kept my opponent back, stringing back to kind of keep him honest for a couple of turns until they just drop in anyway and do it probably some other turn. But then it's like in other games where I didn't take that and I took banners, for example, and I wanted to be a bit more aggressive, then it's like I was using those two Assault Marine squads very aggressively, trading out on points, kind of touching points to make you kind of get to them. If you couldn't get to a certain shooting angle to get to them, I'm staging them there, kind of be that first point of interaction. So the Sanguinary Guard don't have to do the early heavy lifting, but more act as like the cleanup crew. So I feel like adding these like token faster units, I think, do go a long way. And there's actually been like testing on my end where actually I've brought in like a double Scout Storm combo, where it's like you stage 2 Scout Storms a bit higher up, depending on the terrain or depending on the board. And all of a sudden now you get these scouts that just kind of jump to the middle, or you throw the entire storm out into the middle if your opponent doesn't have a ton of shooting, for example, and then kind of get the scouts out into a weird awkward position, or the scouts kind of now disembark behind a ruin that they didn't really plan for and are outside of charge range, but now they just creep into your opponent's zone next turn to get relentless assault, and it's just like, oh my god, these like 60-point scouts are just like such a pain in the butt, and like they have a thunderhammer on them, so I mean like
Do
they're
now.
yeah, they're not nothing, right? And they have a combi melta and a heavy bolter, and anyway, but it's like, you know what I mean? It's like now all of a sudden we can kind of look at these other units to kind of impose this control on the game without actually projecting your entire army into the entire mid board. So I mean, like, I feel like this was a good question to kind of touch upon, and I feel like just mainly understanding threat projection is different from board control. And funny enough, the way you're probably using your blade guard, because I haven't really seen how you use them, but based off your description, that's very much how I use my aggressors. And my aggressors act as that T5 3-wound body that goes to the middle. And if you shoot me with damage 1 weapons, I will use the Gravis strat to give me a 1-up in cover. Like I'll go touch that middle ruin, string 2 guys back to it with the feel no pain, transhuman them, and I'll be like, yep, I'm OBSEC, I'm this, I'm that. You're either going to come take it from me or have to put your whole army sink your whole army into me to do it, and potentially by coming closer to me to do so. So anyway, I think it's an interesting thought, and how we both got there, just in slightly different ways.
Yeah, I think there may be even a little bit of merit now in using incursors, similar to how like if you want a unit that's forward deploy to protect Sangry Guard, the free mine on the incursors now is a little bit helpful against some.
That's interesting.
I'd actually started paying 10 points for the mine because in my meta, there's so many damn Sisters players that are using those MSU Zephyrim with the full hits and rerolls from Morgan Val. They're making like 12-inch charges because they got miracle dice, and I was like, I don't know how to deal with this. And then the way I started dealing with it was like, well, I'll put a mine, and on a 2-up, fingers crossed, I could do 3 mortal wounds, and then there's only 2 Zephyrim left, and maybe I can survive that.
Yeah.
So I used the free mine a couple of times in a recent tournament and thought like infiltrators as a unit that are like kind of giving some board control, but like you said, almost staging forward, right, with a potential to do 3 mortals if they're charged. It's okay. It's better than it was anyway.
Yeah.
Do you know what? We've kind of covered this next question. The high point cost characters. I feel like our characters should have gone down in points. Everybody else's ones did.
Yeah,
like Angels didn't.
Like, I'll keep it short and sweet. Dante should be 145 points. Astorath should be like 125. Sanguinor should be like 120 for what he does. I don't know why he's 150.
He never gets run. He never gets run.
No, okay, this is a really big hot take. Like, really, really big hot take, okay? But I think the Sanguinor should be automatically included in a Blood Angel's army. But, like, easy to kill. So, like, So like he should be like a 4 wound model, no invul, whatever. He just but still same offensive stats, and he can just come in from turns 1 to 3, not turn 2 to 3. That's ridiculous. And he's just built into the fluffiness of the army, where he's like the aura of the Sanguinor, and it just comes down to be heroic for a turn, and he just dies on the spot, and that's it. I think that should literally be a built-in thing into a Blood Angel army.
I think it's silly that he doesn't have the speed of the Primarch Warlord trait, because I think that's the trait you would want him to have.
Yeah.
He doesn't even benefit from half of Heroic Bearing, right? Because Heroic Bearing improves like Rites of War auras, which he doesn't have. So yeah, Helbreck. I've got Helbreck. I've been converting him into a Rebooty Gilliman model for my fun list, and
awesome.
He went down 25 points, and I feel like Dante should have gone down, but maybe there's a Primaris Dante on. So at the moment, any named characters worth taking, in your opinion?
Lamarty's is totally dead because of the Fury of the Lost. You know what's funny? Gabriel Seth, if you're running Flesh Tearers, he's like the one because of his like the +1 damage aura, which is actually very, very interesting when you're running a more foot slogging army. And like imagine like damage 3 Blade Guard, like that's actually pretty spicy when you think about it. But then it's like, or damage 3 Sanguinary Guard, but it's like, are we really going to change like the actual chapter now just because this guy saved 20 points, I think it was, or whatever? So unfortunately, no running Corbulo and Tycho are not worth it, unfortunately.
Yeah, so how do you deal with their vulnerability? You said yourself a lot of people have just gone higher AP now because we've lost Armor of Contempt.
Yeah.
And I guess a good question is, do you run the Selfless Healer? Do you run Soul Warden as well, or do you think the Selfless Healer is enough to deal with morals?
So until recent matchups, I thought Selfless Healer was enough, and it was at the event that I went to, but I feel like with the meta kind of coming now, I feel like as the meta progresses, I think it's up to us as, I guess, higher level players to kind of just continuously adapt, because Blood Angels are not at the top of the food chain, unfortunately. We are not in this position.
We're dead last, are we? Are we the only 45% win rate?
Yeah, I think we're 4th worst or 5th worst win percentage wise, so it was pretty shocking to see that. But I feel like, unfortunately, because of the armies coming up into this top level of the game, people are teching for them. So I mean, when we think about that very high level, and I think everyone should do this at home if you're trying to do well in place at an event, or at least just have your best run, let's say, or whatever your goals it might be. Think about what the top 3 to 4 armies are that are going to be there, right? So it's like right now, Solar Watch Custodes are going to be big with that crazy 20 Warden plus list or 20 Shield Guard list that can charge you, essentially, turn 2, or have their whole army in your zone turn 2. So it's like, how do you kill that army? Mortal Wounds. It's like, okay, Dark Angel Terminators, what are they going to do? It's like they're going to do the exact same thing, but with a permanent transhuman all game. How do you kill them? Also Mortal Wounds. So it's like then all of a sudden it becomes a theme with like, okay, demons, like they actually don't like Mortal Wounds. Votan hate Mortal Wounds. So Mortal Wounds are going to be a lot more prominent now. And now all of a sudden, a token Soul Warden in our list, or a chaplain that can at least chant the litany, maybe an efficient way on a 2-up or something. Now all of a sudden, now this is like a real discussion to bring that back into the list.
That's cool. Yeah, I've ran Soul Warden to a few events. I feel like Soul Warden's the same thing as the Whirlwind. In some matchups, it's going to give you so much value, and then when I take it to an event, I go through 4 matches and go like, well, I haven't fucking used Soul Warden once, so that's
you play World Leaders 4 times, yeah.
I tell you what, I did play Chaos Demons, and it was Zinch Demons where they had, I don't even know, like, I was just getting jealous every time he cast like a Psychic Power, and he's like, that's 9 Mortal Wounds, 3, 3, and 3, and I was like, thank God I've got Soul Warden in here, because if not, this game was over like 20 minutes ago, right? So we're lucky because, I mean, Soul Warden is a Blood Angel specific one. So having Soul Warden on a fast moving character. Do you know what? Someone told me recently, maybe you've not seen the one. Someone said Primaris Chaplain with Voxus Spiritum, so all his auras become 9 inches. Then he's giving Leadership 9 and 9 inches. He takes Soul Warden, so he's giving Soul Warden and 9 inches. And then you either take like Canticle of Hate or Litany of Hate. So either all rerolls on core for melee 9 inches, or and the Primaris Chaplain's on quite a big base as well. So when you actually put him down, you're drawing like a 20-inch pizza. I was like, do you know what? and the Primarch's Chaplain went down in points. I kind of missed that. It went under the radar for me because
Yeah.
I hadn't been running him in so long. But we might see Primarch's Chaplain on a bike make a bit of a resurgence as a buffing character. It seemed interesting anyway for me.
And sorry, quick question. So, because actually I generally don't know this, the Vox of Spiritum, what does it not affect?
It improve. You can only put it on a Primaris model, so you can't put it on like one of our jump pack units. It just, as far as I'm aware, it increases auras by 3 inches. All his auras.
Only reason is because I already thought of a pretty, I think, gross combination right now what we can share with the community. And you heard it here first from John and I.
Okay, 1 second, I'll just read it. Vox of Spiritum. Yeah. Primaris model only adds 3 inches to the range of the bearer's aura abilities to a maximum of 9 inch. Does not increase the range of aura abilities that are psychic powers. But so the chaplain has his leadership aura of 9, so that would get increased.
So even other warlord traits and other relics?
Yeah, yeah.
So then what if we take a Primaris chaplain, we make him the warlord, we give him Soul Warden, we give him Angel Exemplar, so now he can take another warlord trait. Now he has a 9-inch Rights of War as well if we give him that.
Oh, I didn't even think of 9-inch Rights of War.
Now he has 9-inch Rights of War. Then hold on, we're gonna go one up here. Now we're gonna give him Visage of Death, so he has a turn-off OBSEC of 6 inches, and he's -1 to hit in combat now. And all of a sudden,
Visage of Death and aura as well.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, that's why it's my favorite. I'm gonna just go between these, 40 at the time it was like 40 AdMech, Rangers, and be like, okay, well, I'm OBSEC, you're not. I just took this objective from you.
Okay, that's a hot take actually. Then
so now we're cooking. You heard it here first, folks.
no one's running that because no one even when someone told me they were like Vox of Spiritum with Soul Warden, I was like, oh, that's a cool idea.
I thought it turned off based on the wording you told me for Vox of Spiritum, right? It's like if that's a thing, then I thought you can't do that on Rights of War and Visage of Death.
Like you only do it in a Primaris captain. A Primaris character, but it would make sense to put it in the Primaris chaplain, right?
Of course,
because he could have 2 litanies, because you make him the Master of Sanctity.
Yeah, he'll be 140 points, right? He'll have Soul Warden, he'll have Rights of War, he'll have Visage of Death, so he's -1 to hit in combat. He turns off OBSEC in a 6-inch aura. He's now OBSEC 9 inches. He's now also Feel No Pains against mortals 9 inches, and then also you can now chant 2 other litanies entirely on a 2-up. If he's a wise, or sorry, no, he won't be wise orator. So it'll be 3-up.
So 3-up. But and also he has leadership 9 and 9 inches. So that'll help against, I don't know, Chaos Knights or anything that's doing -1 to leadership.
Interesting stuff. Are you gonna try it?
I'm running Gilliman to my GT.
I wanted to ask you. I know we're going off the rails a bit. How do you like him in the list? I've always thought about maybe incorporating him, but you're doing it.
He's a little bit silly, because he shores up 3 things that we typically do badly, which is like we don't reroll on vehicles. So now we do. Typically, like my Blade Guard will be off away from the Chapter Master because they're an Impulsor, so they would always never have any rerolls to hit. Well, they will because Gilliman's 12-inch bubble of +1 is insane. So he does 3 things, which is reroll all 1s within 12 for Imperium, so that affects both our characters, our vehicles, and so like my Chapter Master is running Quake Bolts. So he has a Quake Bolt on a 2. As long as he's within 12 of Gilliman, he's re-rolling it because it doesn't matter. He's a character because it's just Imperium. He does the re-rolls. So I Quake Bolt something. So whatever I Quake Bolt, I'm hitting on 2s. And then pretty much everything's re-rolling 1s within 12 of Gilliman. Everything's getting +2 to charge now. So I rolled a Snake Eyes from my Chapter Master's charge and went, oh, he failed. And then went, hold on a minute. I've got +2. So even with the Snake Eyes, I can move 4.9 inches. Just let me measure that. Oh, I've made it.
Yeah. Wow.
So all my deep strikes, like the Terminators coming in from reserve, anything else coming in from the side of the board, they're needing a 7 for the charge. I've got Icon of the Angel on the list as well, so I'm re-rolling. And then Gilliman also lets you re-roll morale, which is a bit like that's at 8th. You can't re-roll morale anymore, but you can.
That's crazy. That's awesome.
So I failed morale test with like 1 Sangre Guard left, where it was like 4 up. We fail this morale roll. And I was like, oh, hold on, I get to re-roll it. And the guy's like, you can't re-roll morale. And I was like, well, you can if you still have 8th edition rules. So re-rolled it and passed it. And that 1 Sangard in that game was OBSEC and stole the objective. And Gilliman does...
I have to ask, though, then, how many points is Gilliman?
300.
300, eh?
He's got a 3-up invuln, and he's got 9 wounds.
And he comes back on a 4-up.
He comes back on a 4-up, and he has a 4 damage power fist that has no minus to hit, so he hits on 2s, rerolling 1s. Because he's Imperium as well, so he rerolls his own shots as well.
Wow. Does he ignore invulnerable saves?
Well, he doesn't ignore Invulns, but he's got a 3-up Invuln. He's just -4 in the Power Fist, I think. But he still gets Doctrines. You just don't get the Ultramarine chapter tactic. And then there's one other thing he does. And he gives you +3 CP because he's your Warlord, so you start on 9 CP. So that's why I don't need a Priest anymore. So I just pay 1 for Forlorn Fury and then pay 2 for adaptive strategy to put my Death Company in. I'm like, fuck it, I've got 9 CP. So
you're twisting my arm here.
I've got my one character with Icon of the Angel. I've got my other character with Rites of War, Quake Bolts. So I start on 6 CP even with all these extra Warlord traits and shit. I actually have so many CP, I mastercrafted my Terminator Sergeant's Thunderhammer. So he's got 4 damage.
Incredible.
Because he's probably going to make a 7-inch charge, right?
That's interesting. That's really interesting.
I ran it with 2 Bile Predators, and it was kind of silly because the Bile Predators were actually good because it's like they just reroll all their ones.
You know what? I'm actually gonna. You know what? I'll do you a favor. I'm gonna test Gilliman out one evening when my friend comes over. Okay, and I'll let you know what happened.
He is on the same size as like a Chicken Dreadnought base. That's his base size.
Right.
So it's like a 60 mil. So when you draw a 12-inch bubble around that for everybody rerolls 1s, not just core, everybody. Right. So it's pretty much your whole army rerolls 1s. Your whole army gets +2 to charge. Your whole army rerolls morale tests.
That's insane.
Yeah, I mean, it's the reason I'm going to take it to the GT is because no one knows how the fuck to play against it. Right?
No.
And you can't ignore Gilliman because he's a monster in combat.
Oh yeah, he's a monster, right? Yeah.
But I was just hanging out like my Blade Guard, so I was like, well, he's bodyguard, so you can't shoot.
Now wait, does he now affect how our +1 to wound, our Savage Echoes, and all that?
Don't lose any of it because of the new Arks of Omen rules. So previously, if you
included him, I'm thinking about previously. Yeah.
Previously, you would have lost Savage Echoes. That's what you would have lost. You would have lost the Super Doctrine. But the new rules that say you can include a Primarch without breaking any detachment abilities, Savage Echoes was a detachment ability, so you don't lose anything.
Very interesting. I like that.
It's a skew. It's a skew. I'm playing it against World Eaters tomorrow night.
Oh man, I cannot wait to hear how that goes. Please let me know.
But yeah, so it's going to be Mortarion. Sorry, not Mortarion. Angron versus Gilliman tomorrow night.
So damn epic. I love it.
All right, we got like 2 more questions to get through. Right. What are some effective Blood Angels tactics for dealing with enemies deep striking and also reserving units against you? I mean, we've touched on the fact that infiltrators are very useful. Yeah. Is there anything else that we should be considering?
Yeah, I think right away, besides the obvious infiltrators, is scouts in a storm. I feel like people... Like, there's so many things that you can do with that unit, whether it's scoring early relentless, whether it's contesting objectives, whether it's move blocking, and then move blocking kind of plays hand in hand with deep striking. So, for example, I remember there was a game I played against Votan where he was bringing strategic reserves in. He couldn't deep strike his grav. He's like grav guys.
I forget your
name. Yeah, so it was they were coming off the board edges, and I was like, okay, I'm like, if I just advance my infiltrators down that flank, then I'll actually shore up that entire side. I have my 2 infiltrators in the back on these sides, so my back is completely fine. And then what's going to go do that over there? And I'm like, my storm that just moves 18 inches. And then the guys get out, disembark 3, and move 9. Or if they want, they can advance and literally go down the entire line to the point where he's walking off his back field at this point. Or in the back right corner where the infiltrators maybe just didn't touch. So it's like, when you have units like that in your army, I really feel like deep striking is not going to be a problem. And I know you touched on it actually earlier when we talked about Angron, right? Where it's like, that's cool, but if Angron really wants to charge the scouts, that's like, by all means, like, I guess if that's what makes you happy at night, right? You know what I mean? For blood teeth points, but then you're just going to kill him anyway. And then it's like, there's more infiltrators, and it's like, okay, then I've won the game, and he's on the table again on turn 5. Whoop-de-doo, you lose another infiltrator squad. So it's like, at that point, I feel like by having in the 3 infiltrators, or at least 2 infiltrators, maybe another cheeky forward deploying unit, even like an eliminator squad, or like the incursors, like you mentioned, I think is a really good choice too. And then having the scouts in a storm, I feel like just shores up any sort of issues for kind of dealing with enemy deep strikes and reserve denial.
You know, I'm gonna have to get if you're gonna try Gilliman, I'm gonna have to get a scout and some. I've got scouts, I just don't have a storm. How do you arm your scouts then?
Yeah.
Like bolters or sniper rifles?
So I have 3 snipers, 1 heavy bolter, so I can use the strat if I hit D3 mortal
For
wounds in
mortals.
a pinch. In a pinch, I've never used it yet, but in a pinch, it's there. And then the sergeant has the Thunderhammer combi melta, and then they all have camo cloaks for free. So it's like a
Okay.
130 point unit for 60.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's. Oh yeah, because of all the war gears now free. I'm with you.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay. Cool. And then lastly, I guess this was just a quick question about stratagems. Is there any
yeah.
stratagems that you would be always thinking front and center, or is there any ones that win you events? You know, like what are your favorite Blood Angel stratagems? I guess it could go with
Yeah.
anyway.
Right off the hop, the obvious one, Forlorn Fury. Can't leave home without 1 unit to obviously keep your opponents honest. And when your opponent has pre-game moves and you have pre-game moves and you Forlorn Fury your whole Death Company right out into the middle of the board, and then all of a sudden you see them, use their pre-game move to move back, and then seeing the look on their face when you now retract your Death Company back into your zone is priceless. So I mean, like, that's like my favorite use of Forlorn Fury is not even killing with it. It's just to bring them right back home where they belong with Papa. So that's like my literal favorite use of it. And then Unbridled Ardor, I think, is the absolute game-winning mechanism in terms of when it's time to hold objectives, when it's time to kind of box people out from pushing into your ruins or from doing certain plays like that. I feel like having that 6-inch heroic is a huge, huge deterrent. And then obviously Angel Sacrifice, depending on the matchup, of course, like against Tau, probably will do literally nothing ever, unless you're getting charged by Shadow Sun and you have to win the game because you because you need to kind of keep one in cursor alive. But otherwise, it's just like that into a World Eaters matchup, that into any sort of combat skewed matchup, I think is going to go such a long way. Where it's like you can now position 2 sanguinary guard squads to go into 2 different what's it called 8-bound units, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where once it's like, well, he's going to interrupt somewhere and fight on death somewhere, where it's like now all of a sudden he's spending like 4 CP now to interrupt somewhere, because without Angel Sacrifice, you just lose 2 sanguinary guard squads, period. But now all of a sudden, now if you throw a priest in or an apothecary into one, and like let's say the ancient into another, whoever you might want to call it, all of a sudden it's just like now you're actually only losing 1 net sanguinary guard squad and a character, but at least now there is 1 sanguinary guard squad completely untouched that can now move forward into his midboard next turn or do something next turn. Or if you're charged by both, even better, now you've just gained movement with one of those units to kind of now wreak havoc into a new area of the board that he probably didn't, probably account for. So I feel like those 3 are mine. But I'd love to hear your 3, because again, we have slightly different, well, not slightly, we have 2 different lists and the dynamics of how they work. So I mean, those are me for my playstyle. So, how would what 3 would be for yours for your playstyle?
Real quick, because you just started running the Sangre Ancient, did you know that he can use Unbridled Ardor?
Oh yeah, I wear my
know
opponent
that,
every
okay.
game. Yeah.
Okay,
I love it.
I didn't realize till recently that he could do the 6-inch heroic intervention. It seems silly that he can do it that Dante can't, but anyway.
No, I don't. Yeah, don't get started with that.
I like Hammer of Wrath.
Yep.
Into certain, like if you were running in, like I used to play Sisters when they used to run all the Sacrosancts under the sun, and they're really difficult to shift with all their invulnerable saves and stuff. So I've always felt like Hammer of Wrath into certain like toughness 3 armies is always going to do value and kill. You do like 4 or 5 mortals sometimes when you charge. So Hammer of Wrath is a good one. I love Forlorn Fury, use it every game as well. I also use Angel Sacrifice probably every game. I guess Suppression Fire would be my other big one. And a lot of people, I think a lot of people still don't understand the Whirlwind. They look at it as a damaging unit, and the way I look at it is it's not even about the Overwatch denial, it's about the ability to stop them counter-offensing, right? Because like typically in turn 2 or 3, as a Blood Angels player, you are going to be making multiple charges. You want to basically say like, this Sangre Guard's going to charge, I don't know, this Bloodthirster, and this Sangre Guard's going to charge, let's say, Angron. And he's going to interrupt with one of them, right? Like 100%
Sure.
He would do that because he will kill most of the Sangre Guard, if not all of them. So you suppress one target, You fight on the other side of the board first, and then he cannot interrupt. He cannot play counteroffensive on that other target until you've attacked.
Right.
And that, to me, is what I like the Whirlwind for. But in some games, it's huge. In some games, it's you know, if they don't have anything scary in melee combat, then yeah. So that's probably a few of the strats. It's kind of funny that there's a book. There's 2 books with like 30 strats in each, and we probably get by on 5 of them. And then I suppose the only other strat that I use all the time as well is counteroffensive. I like to sit on 2 CP as a Blood Angels player. I always like to sit on 2 CP. I found that much easier now with the, you know, you get one at the start of their turn, you get one at the start of your turn sort of deal. Because I just think it's, if they're ever going to get on top of you, then whichever unit they don't fight with, you'll kill with other unit. So, yeah, I like counteroffensive a lot as well, I suppose.
And I feel like one of the ones that is very obvious, but we both didn't mention, is transhuman. I feel like you use that every turn. It feels like. So it's like it's huge. It's huge in the right place. Actually, it won me the major because the infiltrators refused to die for 2 turns because I transhumaned them and they have the Helix Gauntlet, and I was just like, oh, looks like I have 3 left instead of losing all of them. So that's cool.
Wow.
Yeah,
transhuman is really good. I've actually played Smokescreen and Transhuman on Infiltrators before, with Armor of Contempt before. That was obnoxious. That was so good.
Oh, so good. I did it in Cursors all the time. It was awesome.
So that is about it. That is the questions. I guess what we could say is if anyone has more questions, they could leave them in the comments and we can try and get them in the next video or something, right?
100%. And honestly, I just wanted to obviously thank everyone for showing up today and giving this a watch. And please go, like, share, and subscribe on John's channel as well. I mean, if you already haven't, I mean, what are you doing with your life? No, I'm just kidding. But I mean, like, he's literally the mecca of all things Blood Angels. And if you want a video on Blood Angels, he's done it. If you're thinking about it, he's making it. So please go show him your support and obviously follow his journey as well. And I'd love to give you, again, a special thanks for coming on to my channel to make some great content. So thank you so much, John.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thanks for the same. There's definitely a good half an hour chat over on our channel as well, so you can check that out. And hopefully we'll do something again soon. It's really nice to speak to you, Sam. It's always good to hear your opinions.
Oh, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. Thanks, John.